This is the unrestricted free agent.
Welcome into the program. Glad you're here. And I just pulled my microphone completely off the table.
I think South Carolina's catching Clemson. I really do.
Defense, I'm going to tell you right now, they're nasty. They're going to be nasty all year.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
Who knows what's real and what's not even anymore.
When you see black and white and you're calling it purple, I got problems with that.
And LC, I told you, it's all about the deer talk.
How about that for a start? Today, welcome in. How you doing out there? Hope you're doing well. Got coffee cup number 2 here. Dramatic swig to start. Coffee is warm. Day looks like it's going to be a good day out there. I think it is difficult, though, to have a too sunny of an outlook right now. If you're a Gamecock fan, maybe Kirby's proving me wrong. He says, "Good morning, Tim, and all Georgia haters." Craig's in with the morning guys as well. I don't know. Maybe I'm misdiagnosing it. But from a Gamecock perspective, it's a rough week, isn't it? Let's see what Chris has got to say. Good morning, Tim. Fellow Gamecocks. I was so confused yesterday. I went to service one of my stops and come out and the show ended. Had to go back and watch the end. LOL. Yeah, my bad, Chris. Had to end the show a little early yesterday. Thanks for going back and checking it out. And, of course, the audio is welcome. Thanks for the heads up on that. Let's get some this is going to be the conversation today. Marcus Satterfield. Get you a comment from him. Try to get back nice and clear for you. I'm calling it an identity crisis. I don't know how you can call it anything else. Marcus Satterfield, offensive coordinator, Gamecock football yesterday.
What would I like my identity to be? I'd love to be in 12, 13 personnel, huddle up, run about 58 plays a game, rush for about 275, throw it for about 220, win on third down, win in the red zone, and go home and win games. But it's not that easy. So we have to, like we did in the bowl game, we have to be creative and find ways to win games. We understand we have to run the football, obviously a lot more consistently to stay on the field longer and help our defense out there as well. But we're going to do whatever we got to do to move the ball. And last week, the game became one of those games where, you didn't have a lot of time to establish the run. You had to get the ball down the field. You had to, try to score points. So that's what we tried to do.
If you were looking for a clear vision, like if you were listening for clear audio for me off the top here, you didn't find that yesterday with Marcus Satterfield. You didn't find that at the beginning of this show. It always sounds the same in my ears, by the way. Chris, thanks for the feedback. Glad we're coming in loud and clear here. I am fascinated to hear what you guys have to say. As I continued to listen to Marcus Satterfield yesterday, and then, so the way I was doing it, I was listening, and then I take a few of what I feel like are the more interesting comments out and edit them for this show. And then it just kind of hit me towards the end of listening to Marcus Satterfield. And we'll go through it again. Maybe I should hold that. I'll continue to play a few segments from Marcus Satterfield, just in case you haven't heard, even if you have, maybe. And the way my brain works is, at least the way I think my brain works, I try to go into any of these press conference deals with an open mind. Now, you got to understand the circumstances, obviously, but I try to go in with, hey, let's hear what he or she has to say here. Based off of what I know, I think the conversation will be centered around certain details. Yesterday, it was obviously going to be centered around the Gamecock offensive identity and what Carolina can do to run the football better, especially knowing that they're going to be taking on Georgia this week, which is a nearly impossible spot for almost all opposing offensive coordinators. Let's be very clear about that, right? Marcus Satterfield's in a bad spot this week. You have an offense that hasn't been hitting on all cylinders. You had an offense that struggled in the opener at home against Georgia State. You did go up and put up some yards, a bunch of them in the fourth quarter at Arkansas. and now you're facing Georgia. It's a near impossible task. We'll start there. So to pretend that you had a bunch of answers, I think yesterday would have been a bold move. A bold move slash bordering on the ridiculous in a lot of ways. But I'll play some more of the comments, let you guys assess for yourselves, and then we'll discuss. Because it just bugs me when someone comes on and automatically has the hard take, and then it's just a sell job for however long a show is. Like, hey man, okay, if that's what you believe, great. But I can believe something different. Don't just try to make me believe what you believe. That's not really my style, but we'll see what you guys think. We'll see if you are kind of in the same vein here. T-Far weighing in. Stuck at home with COVID. Praise the Lord for UFA to make the morning a little better to handle. Hey, thanks, man. Thank you for helping out the program on the live chat there. And I hope everybody's feeling okay, and hope you get through that. Get out on the other side quickly. One thing Troy says that South Carolina and Clemson fans have in common. Troy's agreeing with Kirby about being a Georgia hater. Anthony, good morning to you, sir. Oh, he's going sunny outlook. You're stealing Roger's emoji because Roger clearly made up the sun emoji. Hope, good morning to you. Hope might be the most important Gamecock fan there is this week. I feel like there's very little right now. I know the SEC Shorts is all over the Hope character, which is hilarious. But I think it's tough to find Hope. And I think it's tougher to find that in, I was going to say in spades, in a large quantity after listening to Marcus Satterfield yesterday. And maybe that's what I should have expected. Let's first of all hear, and this is probably where it sent me down that route yesterday. The question is, how do you evaluate what you've seen from your run game through the first 2 games of the 2022 season? Here's offensive coordinator Marcus Satterfield's answer.
First and second down, we averaged 5 yards a carry on 12 runs. We had 4 or 5 carries on the goal line where we were just trying to bust it in, running belly plays, and we had 2 or 3 from 3rd and 1. We were trying to do the same thing, so those are going to be 1-yard gains, and it's going to hurt your overall average, and then you throw in sacks and things. But we had 12 runs where we actually handed the ball off from first and second down, average 5 yards a pop. So we have to do that more, and we have to do it more consistently. But I think it just comes down to me. I've got to give our guys more runs, to start a game so that they can get going and get a feel for it.
Oof is my evaluation of that answer. Oof. It was awfully must champion. Getting into the statistical breakdown, and Shane Beamer did it on Tuesday, right? He hinted towards that. Let's give you Shane's answer first so we can talk about this as intelligently, fully fleshed, with as much information as possible before we get too much into it. So that answer, I kind of set it up a little erroneously there. It was more just about how do you evaluate the run game against Arkansas, right? And that's where you heard those specific stats. I never heard a football coach bring up, well, there were a lot of 3rd and 1s or 4th and 1, a lot of short yardage plays, and that's why the stats weren't what they were or a little skewed. Shane Beamer started that on Tuesday.
When we called runs on 1st and 2nd down in the open field, we averaged close to 4 or 5 yards a pop, if I'm not mistaken. Now, those stats got skewed because we had a 3rd and 1, a 4th and 1, a 4th and whatever on the goal line, 3rd and whatever on the goal line, where you're not going to have long runs. So I feel better about our run game coming out of the game last Saturday against Arkansas. All
right, let's stop it right there. Defensive, right? And I get being defensive, and I just never heard that before in my life. One of the explanations for why the run game hasn't been very good is because we've had a lot of short yardage plays. To me, that is an invalid excuse. I don't know how you guys hear that. I hear that as a completely invalid excuse. Like when you have 3rd and short, you're still allowed to bust a big run. Again, if you're all those plays weren't on the goal line. And I think to go that route is just a massive mistake. Can you guys imagine? It's very like Will Muschamp defensive. And I get it. You got to defend what you're doing. And you're in a bad spot this week, man. I mean, these guys have been watching Georgia tape too. We got to keep that in mind, right? The headspace these guys are in, Beamer, Satterfield, watching the country's best defense, if not the best, the second best. But a team that's given up a total of 3 points in 2 games, that just absolutely obliterated Oregon in game number 1. And Kirby Smart had them foaming at the mouth. First of all, you could just tell at media days, if anybody was built to handle the success of a national championship in the program, it seems like Kirby Smart. He wasn't hearing any of that national championship stuff. Nope, last year. Told these guys that was last year's team. Got to do it again. This program was built on sustained success. Everybody's questioning you on defense. All those guys went to the NFL. What are you going to do? And clearly the Georgia defense has played like it has something to prove and a chip on the shoulder, and that it's not resting on any kind of national championship success. So to watch that over and over and over again, to have the task of, hey, you couldn't run the ball well against Georgia State, now you got to run it against Georgia. It's a very difficult place to be. But I just don't buy it. I just don't buy that South Carolina, the run game stats aren't very good because they've had some 3rd and shorts and some short yardage plays on the goal line. It's just bogus. And then to say that you have to run the ball more, Marcus Satterfield to say that it's just up to me to call more runs earlier on. Maybe if it was game 2, if we've only seen 2 games, but we've seen a year in 2 games now, and the slow starts offensively have been what this team is, and not being able to run the ball consistently is certainly what this team has been. Hope. You got to always have hope. Can't get through life without it, especially Carolina fans. Wanted to let you hear a little bit more from Marcus Satterfield here as we go this morning. Next one. Lack of consistency between some big plays was brought up. This is Gamecock Central's Colin Taylor with the question here.
Schematically, from a coaching staff perspective, how do you go about being a little bit more consistent if those explosive plays aren't hitting at the rate they were against Arkansas?
I wish I knew that answer. I'm, again, not trying to be funny. If I did know that answer, we sure as hell wouldn't be inconsistent ever. I think we just had to keep coaching, keep peeling back, just keep doing things that our guys know how to do. Let them free their minds up and go play. And that's what we're trying to do right now, is just be as simple. I don't know, Aristotle, someone said simple is the true genius. Like, we're trying to be the most simple offense in America that can go execute and attack defenses. And I think we just keep working at that, and we keep getting a little bit better each week. And I think we're going to continue to improve as we move forward.
I like the honesty, but it went from honest, I don't know the answer, to coaching cliches, got to keep working and getting better. And that was a tough one, man. That was a tough one. Because I think the real answer, unfortunately, for Gamecock football is it's what Shane Beamer ended up hinting at, not even hinting at, saying specifically, I think at the end of that answer we played the beginning of, that when you call runs, those guys who have to make plays, who have assignments on that play, well, they got to win those one-on-one battles. So to me, that's the real easy answer for being much more consistent in the run game from the Gamecock perspective. Players have got to be better. And that's a tough thing to say going into Georgia on Saturday from the offensive coordinator's perspective. I think you can be more encouraged with the Gamecock offense after game 2 than you were after game 1. game one was such a disappointment. I think I'm still trying to wrap my brain around that. I get it. You won the game by 21 points, but with 2 touchdowns on blocked punts, you got to fake a field goal against Georgia State to keep a drive alive by inches. It's just not at the place it's got to be. And I think it's an offensive identity crisis. I really do. But maybe this exchange here will help illustrate that. Again, Colin Taylor from Gamecock Central asking offensive coordinator Marcus Satterfield the question.
You mentioned trying to find things this offense does well now that you have 2 games on tape, a little bit more of a sample size. What do you feel like are the strengths of this offense that you're going to try and accentuate over the course of the next 10 games or so?
I just think we have some playmakers. I think I have to get our tight ends involved a little bit more in the passing game where they can showcase their skill set. I think we have a really good quarterback, obviously. We got some good wideouts. I think our running backs they've run the ball well when given the opportunity, and I think they've done a really nice job for Marshawn where he was last year to this year catching the ball in the backfield. He's been a weapon for us. So I think just continuing to develop and sharpen our tools and just seeing where the season takes us. I mean, each week's going to be a different story. I mean, it'll be a total different narrative this week and then the next week and the next week. So we're just going to keep fighting and keep growing and keep working.
What are the strengths that you're going to accentuate? He went through every position except offensive line, right? Tight ends, quarterback, receivers, running back. Well, that's not accentuating. I get it. And please understand my perspective is totally skewed after going through the Will Muschamp era and hearing Muschamp talk about a balanced offense and seeing a Gamecock offense whose identity, instead of being a good balanced offense, was being another bad offense under Will Muschamp. And Muschamp brought that reputation with him and did nothing, no matter who his offensive coordinator was, to kind of shed that reputation, identity. That was his identity. Gamecock football took on that identity. So completely unfair to Marcus Satterfield in that way. And yet he understands the job, the situation he came into. That's what it is. This is big boy football. So to hear it's going to be different every week makes me that's what when I hear, well, that's an identity crisis. Are good offenses different every week? Now, I understand you're not going to do the exact same thing every week, and defenses are going to try to play you differently. They're going to play to their strengths. But if you have a core competency, G.A. Mangus would say, if you major in something, then you're going to be able to rely on that every single week. I think if your players hear, and certainly if we're hearing it, the players are hearing it as well, if you hear we're going to be different this week and then we're going to do something totally different the next week, doesn't that register with all of us that, wait a second, well, what do we do? I don't think that registers how it wants offensive coaches to register with others. And Marcus Satterfield's not the only one. I think what he wants it to be is, hey, we're really good at a lot of things. And so we can pick and choose how to attack defenses, and we're going to be strategic and smart about it. But I think it gets ingested. I think it gets analyzed, by me anyway, as we don't have enough confidence to do the same thing every week because we know we can't do it. And maybe I'm overanalyzing it. Probably. And again, not fair because of the Muschamp era. Craig says part of the reason we don't call many runs is we get down 3 scores on the road early in the game. So frustrating. But Craig, you're never down 3 scores on the road in the first drive. You're never down 3 scores on the second drive, unless there's some sort of weird special teams deal. And I agree, Craig. That's a nothing burger answer. I heard a lot of nothing burger. What do you do well? He doesn't know. And that's a problem, man. Steven says Gamecocks need to run the ball for sure. I think their identity, and they should admit it, that the Gamecocks are going to be primarily a passing team. Completely agree. This is Spencer Rattler's team. He is a massively talented quarterback. We really believe in our guys on the outside. That's going to be who we are. That's what I would have liked to have heard from Marcus Satterfield. Hey, we found out who we were in that fourth quarter at Arkansas. Did you guys see how we ran up and down the field? And we know Arkansas was a little bit lacking in the secondary, but what we found in that game is how we are going to be able to establish our offense moving forward. Here it comes. Georgia, it's coming at you. Charlotte and South Carolina State after that, it's coming at you. Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, Missouri. Here it comes. Get ready for it. Because there are no secrets, man. You know, if you have to talk around that or feel you have to talk around that, to me, it's so weak. Like, how would Steve Spurrier approach things right now? And again, this is part of the Gamecock experience, the recent Gamecock experience in the last decade, right? Most confident head coach, maybe in the history of college football, certainly one of the best play callers and offensive minds. Then you switch to Will Muschamp. And now you're in the very formative stages of Shane Beamer with a first-time offensive coordinator in the SEC in major college football. I get Marcus Satterfield has called plays before. He has, again, by all accounts, really bright guy, knows offensive football, has seen it at the highest level, coming from being an assistant at the Carolina Panthers. Kevin, a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Well, that's what this offense has shown in 2 games. I guess actually it hasn't. It's saying that, but it's shown that it can throw the ball much better than it can run the football. And yet, still just not willing to say that, or I don't know what the deal is there. I guess knowing that maybe their philosophy is you got to run to set up the pass, but I think clearly you got to pivot. And a massive reason for that has been the offensive line's inability to get consistent push. Marcus Satterfield was saying how good Georgia State was yesterday. And to me, I mean, maybe they're going to make some kind of crazy run, but they just lost to North Carolina, gave up 35 points. I just don't see that being a thing. I see that being much more coach talk than anything else. And I think Steve Spurrier would handle this very simply. Yeah, we can't run it. We struggled to run the football, so we're going to throw it. Because if something's not working, you got to do something else. And yeah, we're going to try some different guys in there, and hopefully we'll be able to run it better. But we know we got to throw the football. Why can't you just say that? Here was Marcus Satterfield's kind of assessment of the offensive line play, I think just specifically from that Arkansas game.
I think it's just getting to play and continue to play and getting out in the games and just playing ball. You know, we've challenged them all week this week that they have to improve. You know, we've got to protect our quarterback. And if you can protect our quarterback, then we have a chance for good things to happen. So, you know, I love those guys, not down on them at all. I'm their biggest protector, and I think they do a hell of a job. They're tough.
I understand where he's coming from. He wants his guys to have confidence. He doesn't want to throw them under the bus, especially through 2 games, especially knowing that they're a really experienced group. But you can't protect a group whose sole job is to protect, and they haven't been doing their job. You're not doing your job by protecting them. Does that make any sense? you can't protect a unit that's not protecting its quarterback. And, I mean, gave up 6 sacks last week. You get up 9 sacks on the season. You only have 2. Georgia State and Arkansas. Now you got Georgia coming to town. What a challenge. I think you absolutely put it in your quarterback's hands. Here's what Satterfield had to say about Spencer Rattler.
Captain the last game. He's got a lot of family ties to Arkansas. I think he handled it really, really well. It was never too big for him, never too fast for him, never too loud for him. He communicated at an elite level. He delivered the ball on time. I think he improved from week 1 to week 2, and I think, based on the practice I just watched, just then he's improving from week 2 to week 3. So I'm very pleased with where he is and his progress, and he continues to just grind away at it to be his, the best him.
Clearly not unhappy with this quarterback. Teammates seem to be behind him, voting him a captain for that last game. Had some family ties, dad's family from Arkansas, so didn't let any kind of personal stuff get in the way. I think Spencer Rattler has to be the guy. He's got to be the guy, and why you can't just come out and say that, I don't know. We know the best coaches adjust to their personnel, put their best players in the best positions to make plays. I don't think Carolina's fooling anybody right now. And what we've seen on the field, to me, it's got to be Spencer Rattler making plays for the Gamecocks. Chris says you can change everything, have all the talent on the offensive side, but you can't do anything if you don't have time because of blocking. It's like a kid that keeps doing bad things, but the mom keeps making excuses for them so they don't change things to make things better. I saw something on social media yesterday. I almost retweeted it, but I feel like I probably retweet these things too much, and I don't want to be preachy, but it was an account that's for like sports parents. I think it might even be named that. It said, if your coach is challenging your player and saying that they need to stop talking or respect their coach more or do things that they're being asked to do in a better way, don't say your son is or daughter is being picked on. How about join forces, be an advocate for the coach, help your son or daughter move in the positive direction instead of taking kind of the victim mentality, is what I pulled away from that. And I think that's what you're saying there, Chris. And I think as the leader of the offense, the Gamecocks find themselves in a bit of an identity crisis. I think Marcus Satterfield himself does. That they haven't gone one lane or another. If you're just saying every single game, it's going to be a different narrative. I think that's a problem. And again, it's leftover baggage for sure. I feel like this is a bunch of the Will Muschamp offense was you give what the defense takes you. No, that's not it. You take what the defense gives you. There we go. Well, then you're letting the defense dictate your offense, and that's not good football, man. That's what the run-pass option became, right? And I think defensive coordinators, opposing teams, certainly figured out ways to dictate things. Clayton White was really interesting yesterday, talking about Stetson Bennett the fourth there. So experienced, how are you going to be able to defend Georgia? How are you going to be able to disguise, be multiple, all of that defensive coach talk? It's going to be tough, man. It's not going to be easy. You still got to try to do it, though. You can't just show them what you're doing and then let them get after you. And so Marcus Satterfield, not the only Gamecock coordinator talking. Craig says, I guarantee you Sam Pittman doesn't answer that question like that. And that's what I came to yesterday before we get to Clayton White. At the end of me hearing Marcus Satterfield's comments, and I think we've run through them all that I wanted to play for you. I came to the conclusion that, wait a second, I think I heard a lot of this before. And I don't think I hear a lot of good offenses, people who are in charge of good offenses, speak this way. I just don't. Like, when you hear from Shane Beamer before that Arkansas game that, yeah, we got to figure out a way to stop their run offense because that's what they do. They just bludgeon you. They got an identity. You knew what they were going to do. You still couldn't stop it. That's a good football team. That's where you got to get to. And if you're telling us that you got an NFL quarterback, that you got NFL receivers, you got NFL tight ends, well, those guys then should be able to make plays. Even if you let the big secret out that you're going to be a pass-first offense. Arkansas's run first. Couldn't stop it. Clayton White's a really smart guy. Gamecocks have some good players on defense. A couple of those guys went down injured. Arkansas made plays at the beginning. The Gamecocks made some adjustments, slowed down that offense, got back in the game, and then they made a bunch of plays late as well. You weren't able to stop it. Not afraid to have the identity. I get it. They might have one of the strongest identities in the country offensively. Because I think Georgia's a really balanced offense as well. But this is almost where I see that mistake that Will Muschamp made, that Jeremy Pruitt made, that a bunch of other coaches have made, where you take what has worked somewhere else and you try to make that work at a different place, where Will Muschamp, Jeremy Pruitt tried to put the Nick Saban model in at South Carolina and Tennessee, and they couldn't do it. It didn't work. Well, even when we talked about the Gamecock offense before we ever saw it under Shane Beamer, saying it's going to be a little bit of Oklahoma and a little bit of LSU and Joe Brady, and say, wait a second, LSU and Oklahoma, you're going to combine those offenses and make it work at South Carolina? Offensive players that LSU and Oklahoma recruit are absolutely elite year after year. South Carolina has not been that. They've been pretty good in recruiting. But especially compared to their opponents, they're not going to out-talent a bunch of people. And even when they do, we just saw they got better players than Georgia State. Shane Beamer saying they had a depth and talent advantage going in. Not able to take advantage of it. And that's wildly concerning, man. And so you got to come up with, you feel like Shane Beamer has done it from a culture perspective, made the Gamecock program unique. I think Clayton White has done it pretty well defensively, that they're going to run that 4-2-5 and they're going to turn you over in year number one, especially, and make enough plays, be a sound defense. Special teams look like through game number one this year going to be kind of an elite unit and maybe a big time identifier of the Gamecock football program. And then the exact opposite performance. And we didn't hear from Pete Limbo, the special teams coordinator, yesterday. But on offense, I don't know. Yeah, that's all I'm saying, Chris. Maybe use the pass to open up the run instead of starting out trying to run the football. I think it's a bit of an identity crisis. It's a struggle right now to run the football for sure. The Gamecocks towards the bottom of the league. I think actually last in yards per game running. Kentucky, I think, next to just the only one really close to them. They've been without Chris Rodriguez, who I believe is coming back this week for the Wildcats, and a surprising number there for sure, but just played at Florida. Similar to at Arkansas for Carolina. So just 2 games in, we'll see. We'll see where it goes from here. We'll see if Marcus Satterfield changes the way he talks about things. And he might be saying completely different things behind closed doors to his players. But fascinating to hear him speak yesterday. Clayton White, the defensive coordinator for Carolina, also speaking. Main issue for him, clearly, missed tackles in the Arkansas game. The numbers were not good. I want to say it's something like 21 missed tackles and 160 yards after contact, something like that. Just the numbers were bad enough where Shane Beamer said, yeah, I'm not going to talk about the specifics there. I'll let Clayton White do that. And so here's what the defensive coordinator had to say about tackling issues in that Arkansas game.
It's one of those things where I think our defense right now, as a whole, it starts with me, that we're taking a lot of pride in just, being more physical at the point of contact. We got to make those tackles. We got to get those guys down, stop their feet so they can't get those yards after contact regardless of the size or the situation. But we got to be better at that, obviously. And obviously our guys, I like how they're taking it on this week as a pride thing. And that's the first way it has to start inside the locker room instead of us. It can't always be the coaches. I think they're doing a good job of trying to change some things.
So taking accountability there starts with me. That's kind of coaching 101, right? Press conference 101. My fault. I shoulder the responsibility. And then towards the end, say, no, I like what I'm seeing because they understand they got to fix it. Ultimately, I can't do anything on the field. But what he didn't say is that in there is Arkansas is really hard to tackle, which is a fact, right? But not using it as an excuse or even part of the explanation. Also mentioned that Shane Beamer has made it a point this week in practice to make sure to stress tackling, to give a little extra time to it. If you see better tackling against Georgia than Arkansas, I mean, you got to have that for sure to be in the game, to be competitive. I don't know if you fix that in a week, but you can certainly stress it. And then guys can just simply make more plays. But how do you stop a Georgia offense that is impressive for sure? That, again, this is an interesting time to have Georgia on the schedule, talking about the Gamecock offense as well, because when Mike Bobo was there for years and years and years, the identity was really clear that they're going to be a downhill running team, right? Line up in the eye, and then they'll play action pass you. I don't think that has changed too much, even though Bobo obviously has been gone for a long time, and we saw him at South Carolina, and the Auburn thing didn't work out, and we know the Mike Bobo story. But Georgia doesn't have I guess their identity is they're going to be able to run the football when they need to, and they'll be able to throw it when they need to. They are pretty balanced. I think that is one of those programs that maybe guys like Marcus Satterfield or Will Muschamp, when he was the head coach, look over and say, yes, we want to be able to do that. Georgia's recruiting, though, is way up there. When you have better talent across the board, you should be able to pick and choose kind of how you attack people. But being able to run when you need to run seems to, in my mind, stick out when you're talking about a Georgia offense. So how do you stop it? Especially with a really a really experienced quarterback. I know we should probably say talented as well, but that's not how we talk about Stetson Bennett, right? Especially compared to some of the other guys out there. So Clayton White goes a defensive buzzword on us, and then thankfully was asked to explain what he means by it. Here's the defensive coordinator from Carolina yesterday.
We harp on it a lot, and I mean, there's multiple ways we can do some things. We just have to make sure it's the right fit, make sure it's the right thing that we can do for our defense. But we can obviously be multiple. We have to be more multiple against these kind of teams, especially a running quarterback team, and obviously a power team like Georgia. So we got to be very smart on how we go about this game.
What does that look like, and how do you go about maybe coaching that throughout the week to get guys prepared to be multiple?
It's one of those words that get thrown around in football, and people just say it. I mean, some people say it, some people do it, some people don't. And what I mean by that is, like, obviously you can play different fronts, you can play different coverages to help certain things based on what the offense is giving you.
Multiple. Oh, that from a defensive standpoint, arm talent on offense. pet peeves for me. You guys ever hear anything from a coach and you're just like, ugh. So that's why I threw that in there for sure. He's like, yeah, well, we can talk about it. I don't know if most people do it. To me, when I hear that defenses have to be multiple, I hear that you got to be able to disguise what you're doing. You got to be able to throw different things at them that maybe you haven't put on tape before. It's never a good sign, I don't think, when you're hearing that from your defensive coordinator. But we all know it doesn't look good for Carolina's defense or offense going into the Georgia game. 24.5 points. The spread says that for sure. Roger, good morning, sir. Says it's okay. I'll share my sunshine with you there, Anthony. Good stuff. Chris, me being optimistic, we saw improvements in game 2, so we should see more improvements, hopefully anyways. LOL. That's a good, sunny way to look at it. Offensively especially. Except that now you're playing Georgia. And then even if it doesn't go well, I think from an optimistic standpoint, you can dismiss that, right? And I feel like maybe that's where South Carolina football is this week. A lot of optimism, enthusiasm going into the season. You win your first game by 21 points. You get some big plays on special teams. You have some concerns for sure when you get outgained by Georgia State. You run for 2.5 yards per carry against a Sun Belt team. But hey, man, look at what the Sun Belt's done this year. And Shane Beamer walking off the field on September 3rd said, yep, other SEC programs haven't been as fortunate, haven't won as convincingly as we just did. There's no doubt. Tennessee, sensitive fan base, the sensitive Vols getting all riled up with that. I think Gamecock fans fine with it. So I don't think you felt good after the opener necessarily. You certainly, and this is part of the issue with winning that bowl game how you did. It was going to be very difficult to carry over that massively positive reaction and outlook and optimism and the whole thing, no matter what happened. Outside of being 2-0 going into Georgia. Outside of maybe Georgia losing to Oregon in that opener, it was going to be really hard to continue on that steep ascent that the North Carolina bowl game just took the program to that level. Very clearly, right? You finish 6-7, you get beat by another ACC school. Then it's a good year. It's a good first year going from 2 wins. But when South Carolina just ran up and down the field on North Carolina and showed an offense that Marcus Satterfield really just didn't have in year number 1, when Dakereon Joyner is slicing and dicing the opposing defense and going 9 for 9 and the whole thing, I think it blew a lot of people's minds. It blew my mind. Totally blew my mind. And speaking of that, Dakereon Joyner, we didn't even talk about him yesterday. Shane Beamer did talk about him on Tuesday. And here's what he has to say about the bowl game MVP and why we haven't seen much of him through 2 games in 2022.
I love Dakereon Joyner, and he's everything that's right, about Carolina football. And he's a hell of a football player too. And he's really good on us for special teams and offense and multiple positions. It's not like we have forgotten what he did in the bowl game. He showed he can play quarterback in that bowl game at a high level. He wasn't healthy in that first game, and he was more healthier last Saturday against Arkansas. So when he is healthy, he's a fantastic leader. He's a really good football player that's a valuable member of all of our special teams, and then a valuable member of our offense, whether it's wide receiver, whether it's quarterback, whatever. He's shown that he can do that, and we need to continue to find ways to keep him involved, have him involved.
It's another part of the offensive identity, isn't it? Another, I think, struggle that fans have. Say, who was that guy in the bowl game, man? And where was that offense? That's what you need every single game. And I think, well, first of all, North Carolina's defense we've seen not that stout. So I don't think Carolina now gets full credit for what we saw in the bowl game. And then the Carry-on Joyner kind of conundrum right now. Had a calf injury in the first game, we were told, and then maybe not at 100% in game number 2, but I think was out on the field and just never touched the ball. What do you do moving forward, man? Well, if you're saying get the ball to Juice Wells, who's leading the SEC in receiving, I understand and wouldn't disagree with you necessarily. Marcus Satterfield talking about his transfer receiver from James Madison yesterday.
Juice, it's funny. We were telling the team or the unit the other day, there's not one personnel grouping on the sheet that's like specifically let's get Juice the ball on this play. It's just he's a guy that really plays really, really hard. He's where he's supposed to be at the right time, and we throw him the ball and he goes up and makes plays. So, based on kind of formations and stuff we were in the last game, he was getting some good matchups, and he was able to win those one-on-ones. But Juice is, like we said there last week, just a really hard worker, very competitive, and hopefully continues to improve himself as well.
So he might be the best example, right? Let me translate that a little bit. Hey, if I'm asked as the offensive coordinator, what do you think about Juice Wells leading the SEC in receiving through 2 games? Then my answer, and maybe this is kind of where Marcus Satterfield is coming from. That's what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Juice Wells is the best example from my offense of how we will be able to attack teams differently from week to week, because we do not focus on getting Juice Wells the ball, and yet he's been the beneficiary of being a balanced offense through 2 games. Because teams have to prepare for Jaheim Bell, because teams are concerned about Marshawn Lloyd running the football on him, because Josh Vann was our number 1 guy last year and is a proven entity in the SEC, Juice Wells has been able to get open and do it consistently. And Spencer Rattler is a good enough quarterback to use that to our advantage. That's what we are going to continue to do week after week after week. It might not be Juice Wells every week. It might be Jaheim Bell this week or Josh Vann. Again, our offense is talented enough where we don't have to focus to get the ball to one guy to move the football. We are balanced enough to have other weapons step up and hurt opposing defenses. Juice Wells is the example that you've seen through 2 weeks this season. We hope he continues to do that. Or if you want to go really aggressive, we hope opposing defenses will continue to play us how they played us, because Juice Wells is gonna do exactly what he said Carolina would do going into game number 1. He's going to kill him. He's been killing them. He's going to continue to kill them if opposing defenses don't change what they're doing. How about that? That would be a statement, wouldn't it? That would be an identity. Josh, UNC was an outlier. They were terrible at defense. It was definitely fun, but it gave false hopes. Gave false hope there. And he says, agree, Josh, Florida last year too. Well, wait a second. How many do you throw in there? Right? You do have to give some credit. Yeah, Craig, I think this is the big picture where Gamecock fans are right now. Not many teams are playing number 10 and number 1 in the first 3 games. It's tough. We knew it could look ugly. Yep. That's the sense I'm getting from Gamecock fans right now. You don't go thumping your chest or feeling real good about yourself when you couldn't stop the run against Arkansas. Was number 16 at the time, but they moved up to number 10 for a reason. And then knowing that the defending national champs are coming to town. Roger says the bowl game's starting to look like an out-of-body experience. We've seen it can happen, but he's going to have to improve as an offensive coordinator. He won't be back. RL, there's not an answer for this question, but I do ponder from time to time what the ceiling is for this season's team. Well, that's why I think you've seen a ceiling adjustment for anyone who was unrealistic. If you thought the sky is the limit for Gamecock football in year number 2 under Shane Beamer, I think KJ Jefferson and company bludgeoned that ceiling or cobbled up that ceiling pretty quickly as they continued to mount those points and almost score 50 in that game. But I think most of us, I mean, my floor to ceiling range was 9-3 at the top, 4-8 at the bottom. Maybe 3-9. You want to go doomsday and say, well, you barely beat Vanderbilt last year. Vandy could beat you. You're going to beat Georgia State, South Carolina State, and Charlotte. How far are we away from reaching that ceiling? Pretty far away right now, RL, I would say. I mean, you got to smart and efficient is what Shane Beamer talked about on Tuesday. I think this is an appropriate time to play that comment. Like, how do you move the football? How do you have success against Georgia? Well, you simply just got to be better than what you've shown in 2 weeks.
We got to play smart football and efficient, and that's one thing that we haven't done the first 2 weeks. We've done some really good things offensively the first 2 games, but we've had way too many negative plays. We've had way too many drops. We've had way too many turnovers. When you talk about negative things on offense, we've had way too many of those the last 2 games. And then you could say the same thing defensively the last game with mental errors and missed tackles. So we've got to have a lot more winning reps, winning plays, if you will, than what we've had the last two weeks as well. And just have those winning plays and just try and stack one on top of another and see where we are at the end of the day.
When I first heard that, I thought a lot about Georgia, right? And the elite programs. That's how you become elite. You got guys in position, and they consistently win those one-on-one matchups. And coaches are able then to build the identity around that. They can count on it. That's part of the really concerning part, I think, for the Gamecock offense, for Marcus Satterfield, from what I heard yesterday. If your offense isn't performing up to what you hoped it would, then you do approach it like he was talking about, trying to have the simplest offense in America, right? You pare things down. You make sure your guys know what they're doing. They're not thinking, they're playing. But you got to have those guys win those. You got to have the push up front if you're going to run the football, or you got to be able to protect your quarterback enough or call plays around it. If you're going empty, then that's exactly what you have to avoid, is what Shane Beamer is talking about, those negative plays. You can't have much of a good offensive identity if you have as many negative and no yardage plays as the Gamecocks have had. Got to move that thing to much more manageable down and distances, and then you can break some runs, get that run yard average way up there, and you don't have to come into a press conference and say, well, we're actually averaging 5 yards per carry on first and second down. It's that third and short stuff that's really skewing those stats. Come on, man. I don't think anybody's buying that. Nobody's saying, well, okay. No problem then. That's like a defensive coach coming in and say, yeah, we just got to get better on third down. There's never been a defense out there that's had a really good reputation, and then we all just say, oh, they're really good on first and second down. It's just that third down thing. So it's just in their head. They'll eventually figure it out. No, they're just not good enough. There is no good running team out there on first and second down, and then just for some reason they can't run the ball on third down. I don't even understand getting into that explanation. I mean, from a number standpoint, I get it, right? You say, oh, let me pull a silver lining out of this thing. But I think it gets heard, and maybe it's because of the lack of production or just the eye test in general from Gamecock football fans with its offense so far. I don't know. Chris says, we're not going to be better than Georgia. We just need to show up and play our best football. Yeah, and that response, Shane Beamer was talking about being smart and efficient, was a response to a question my buddy Mike Gillespie over at ABC Columbia asked, do you have to play a perfect game to beat Georgia? And no coach is ever going to say, yeah, we got to be perfect or we ain't got a shot. Perfect games are unrealistic and impossible, but we've seen some examples in sports of near perfect games. Villanova basketball against Georgetown back in the day, they shot some ridiculous number. I forget what it was. You guys feel free to look that up. Whatever I'm going to say, my brain doesn't want me to say, like some 75% or something dumb. But that's one of the main reasons why they were the big time Cinderellas. And again, you don't say Cinderella around Shane Beamer this week. If you texted him that, he didn't appreciate it. And that is kind of an identity crisis, again, that Gamecocks are going through. Gamecock fans, maybe players too. I don't know, but let you hear more about that. Let you hear that in its entirety. I'm sure you probably already heard it. The outlook, the belief from Shane Beamer. I actually don't have that one right in front of me right now. I'll do that in just a second. But I thought that was the most interesting answer that he gave in his weekly press conference when asked about, hey, the college football just showed us that upsets are possible, and do you use that to your advantage and the whole thing? And he wasn't having any of that, and not happy that people in his family were texting him that kind of sentiment, because and I put it out on social media immediately after I heard it. Like, that's just not how you can compete at South Carolina with that kind of mindset. You just get crushed on the recruiting trail if you're saying, yeah, maybe everything will come together this week and we can shock the world and pull the upset and the whole thing, which you might be able to say afterwards, but you can't say that going into the game at South Carolina against Georgia. Keep that in mind, right? I mean, Shane Beamer was also talking about his relationship with Kirby Smart and coming in year number 1 and how they barely beat Nicholls State that year and they lost to Georgia Tech. I mean, things change quickly, don't they? Well, maybe not quickly, but our perception of college football is so much different since Kirby Smart came to Georgia. That program has gone to such another level. And Gamecock football, kind of the reverse, maybe not just in that time, but certainly from the Spurrier years. Shane Beamer's job is to build it back up there, and you can't do that with some sort of Cinderella. As long as we play perfect and the other team doesn't play well, then we can pull off a win against the number 1 team in the country, the defending national champs. Because this is, from the Gamecock perspective, a game that South Carolina fans are not unaccustomed to winning. I'm not going to say they're used to winning, but they've won their fair share. So, yeah, and the fan base definitely wouldn't say, oh, great, we think we can pull off a miracle and beat Georgia. That's not the way it works in South Carolina. That's not the way it should work. Kevin says if you average 5 yards per carry, no way you get away from that. That's the receipt for success on offense. Yeah, exactly. And so that's why if you're going to sell me that and then just say you just need to do it more and the offensive line just needs to play ball, hey, I'm hearing that you don't have answers. And that's kind of the conclusion I came to after hearing from Marcus Satterfield yesterday. Again, to be very clear, Not many offensive coordinators are going to have answers for that Georgia defense. And to pretend that you do, and then it turns out that you didn't, or your answers were completely wrong, that might set you back more than approaching it how he approached it yesterday. Jason, my expectations for the season were 6-6 again, maybe 7-5 if optimistic, and nothing's really changed that for me yet. I think South Carolina can still achieve that. Also, I think Arkansas is really good. Right with you there, Jason. I said 7-5 because Spencer Rattler added to the mix, Juice Wells added to the mix. I thought Marshawn Lloyd would be better. I thought the offensive line would play better than what we saw overall last year. Not a ton better, but in year 2 of an offense, I expected offensive progression. I think it's fair to say we haven't seen that through 2 games. I understand there was the state newspaper story was focusing on improved offensive passing numbers, where it's about 100 yards more than it was last year. I know Spencer Rattler is up there amongst the SEC leaders, but I saw a lot of that coming in the fourth quarter against Arkansas. I'm not giving full credit for that. I saw struggles against Georgia State, and that's not a good sign. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen against Georgia. I mean, we have seen a bunch of South Carolina teams step up and play their best football, its best football, against Georgia through the years. That win 3 years ago in Athens is still, I mean, I can't even say it without shaking my head. Maybe the number 5 prediction in the SEC East preseason poll will end up being pretty accurate after all. We shall see. We can improve on that. Just got to get much better. We'll see. Well, I think it was fair. I don't think anybody was saying it was unfair to pick South Carolina 5th in the East. But I was definitely saying, if I'm Shane Beamer, that's what I want, man. Under the radar, no real national, even regional expectations. So anything that you do becomes, it gets seen a lot like last year was seen, right? Having success, even to the Duke's Mayo Bowl level, was not expected at South Carolina last year. So Shane Beamer up there with Josh Heupel accepting an award for Steve Spurrier Coach of the Year. First year coach that did the best with what he was kind of given. And even in the win now, you're getting paid millions of dollars, world of SEC football in 2022. Nobody expecting that from Shane Beamer, even after getting Spencer Rattler in. So to me, I saw it as kind of right where you want to be if you're Shane Beamer and company from an outside expectation standpoint, as opposed to maybe you could take that as a big sign of disrespect or people sleeping on a program that was going to be better. But you got to be fair, I think, to the other teams too, and know what they had coming back. And KT, maybe that's my ultimate frustration, or maybe that's where it got as I was listening to Marcus Satterfield yesterday, seeing kind of the reaction and how he wanted to talk more and kind of defend his offense about being able to run the football more. But bringing up that stat about averaging 5 yards per carry on first and second down, again, you're exactly right. No way you get away from that. If you're telling me you are having success doing that, then why didn't you do it more? If you're confident that you can run the football, you got to do it more. And I know Marcus Satterfield says it's just a matter of doing that. And he was asked about throwing the football with Spencer Rattler. And maybe this little question and answer exchange does explain a lot of that.
Marcus, when you have a guy like Spencer with his arm talent, playmaking ability, as a play caller, does that maybe give you the tendency a little bit more to maybe call a pass in a play where maybe, last year you may not have called a pass? I mean, how does that sort of just having him affect you as a play caller?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I go into every game, we're going to spin that thing and throw it down the field. And that's what we said going into the season. So that's not going to change. I mean, if it's there and you're going to give us certain coverage, we're not just going to run the ball just to be hard-headed. We're going to take advantage of it. And so, again, to answer your question, it makes it's addicting at times because you see that, you got that and you want it, but you do have to find a way to run the football a bit more.
So just have that be your identity. Spencer Rattler's going to be their guy. We're going to throw it. That's going to help open up the run. Why not just say that? Why not be that team? To me, that's not an admission that you don't believe in your offensive line or running backs. I mean, are you scared of guys transferring out? I don't get it. Have you not said that on the recruiting trail, maybe? I don't understand. Are you worried about a transfer just coming into the program and completely kind of changing the message that you've been telling everybody? To me, that's the only rational explanation because I'm just hearing two different things. I'm kind of hearing it out of both sides of their mouth that you got to run the football, but 100% Spencer Rattler affects the play calling. And that's why I ended up putting this together because after hearing all the Marcus Satterfield comments yesterday, there were several almost direct conflicts in some of those answers. And I really do think it's an offensive identity crisis at Carolina.
Are you guys still figuring out the offensive identity?
Each week's going to be a different story. And I'm not going to lie, go into every game, we're going to spin that thing and throw it down the field. We understand we have to run the football.
How do you go about being a little bit more consistent?
I wish I knew that answer. If I did know that answer, we sure as hell wouldn't be inconsistent ever.
What do you feel like are the strengths of this offense?
We have some playmakers. I think we have a really good quarterback, obviously. We got some good wideouts. I have to get our tight ends involved a little bit more in the passing game. So I think our running backs have, they've run the ball well. Like we did in the bowl game, we have to be creative. I don't know, Aristotle, someone said simple is the true genius. So we're trying to be the most simple offense in America. It'll be a total different narrative this week and then the next week and the next week.
I just don't understand the direction. To me, it doesn't sound like Marcus Satterfield understands the direction or is going to pick a direction, going to allow the defense to pick the direction you go in. And Gamecock fans have seen that movie, and it didn't go well, man. So you got to be more creative, and yet you're trying to have the simplest offense in America. You really want to throw the football with Spencer Rattler, you got to run it. You're telling me you run 5 yards per carry and you just got to call it more. You're telling me the solution for the offensive line to play better is just to play more. You're asked, what are your strengths of the offense? And you name every position in the offense. It's an identity crisis. But what offense doesn't have an identity crisis going into play Georgia? Coming off a play at Arkansas, I think really, really good offenses. And I don't know how many of those exist in college football. Maybe I should say really, really good offenses or just coaches that have had an offensive system. I think Mississippi State seems to be a really, really good offense, but Mike Leach was going to have his identity no matter what. I mean, you go back a couple of years, Mike Bobo was going to have the identity going into a game, even though his offense wasn't really, really good. I think this issue might be twofold. The fact that Marcus Satterfield came to Carolina without a reputation to the outside world anyway, to fans for sure, as this is what his offense is going to be. Then Shane Beamer comes in as a first-year head coach with him. And you say it's going to be some of the Oklahoma offense, going to be some of what Joe Brady did at LSU. You got to have personnel to match that. South Carolina clearly doesn't have the overwhelming talent to just out-talent people. And so you got to create your own unique thing. You got to create what your team can do well consistently. That's a difficult part. Chris says you don't have a guy like Rattler and not become a pass-first offense. Well, I think you could. Trying to think of other really good quarterbacks where, is Alabama a pass-first offense? Well, yeah, it is. It has become that. If Nick Saban has evolved to that, and Bryce Young's not the first time this has happened, right? This has happened. This is where Nick Saban gets all the credit for being the head coach who adapts the most, right? And they might not sell it as that, but that's certainly, they're spread you out. And in that way, kind of pass first, aren't they? And that's what we've seen from this Carolina offense, right? They go empty set probably more than anything else. So you're showing us that, but you're not telling us that, or you're not backing it up confidently. To me, that's a problem when I hear that from the offensive coordinator. But be very clear. Yesterday, when you're an offensive coordinator and you're having a press conference and you're about to play Georgia and you are at the bottom of the league running the football, I don't think you're going to write any checks that you're not positive you can cash. And it's still early on in the 2022 season. So you also don't want to have players lose confidence in its offense's ability, the play caller's ability, their teammates, the whole thing. So you do have to keep it in perspective. The rushing yards on third down, Roger says, a different animal than first and second. It requires a toughness Carolina hasn't shown yet, primarily toughness on the offensive line. Absolutely. And that's why, again, I just don't buy better numbers on first and second down from an average yard per rush. It's just the fact that there have been so many third downs that have skewed those stats. Not buying it. Never heard that explanation before. Not going to start buying it now. So, where does Carolina go from here? I really think it's got to be throw first, put it on Spencer Rattler. And it doesn't have to be it can't be just throwing the ball vertically down the field, taking deep shots all the time and the whole thing. It can be a lot of dink and dunks. Running backs out of the backfield. Jaheim Bell, a shovel pass, an end around, whatever. Glorified runs in the passing game, you could certainly do. But again, when Shane Beamer has to come into a post-game press conference after playing a Sun Belt team and say, we got whipped on the perimeter, that's a problem, right? That's a massive problem. When we all saw, he didn't say it, but we all saw, we didn't see, I should say, we didn't see any consistent offensive push on the offensive line against Georgia State. You're not going to see it against Georgia. If I shouldn't say that. It's college football. You never know what you're going to see. But if you see it against Georgia, I think all of us will just shake our heads and say, man, what is going on? It doesn't make any sense that you'll see it against Georgia. Probably the best way to put that, right? No, Chris, they haven't shuffled the offensive line around at all. I don't think it's been the same five guys in the same spots the last two games exactly. You've seen maybe a few, but this is not a lack of evaluation, I don't think. These guys are on the field for a reason, and it's not recent. Clearly, they're showing something in practice that the frontline guys are better than the guys behind them. So you don't put the guy in who hasn't proven it in practice and say, oh, yeah, this is going to help make things better. Bottom line from the Toaster, doesn't it all come back for us needing to have a better offensive line? That would spell more successful runs, more time for Rattler to pass, and more rest for the defense. It's a good question, but when I hear from a guy who played in the NFL like Corey Miller say, hey, just go up tempo. Just go some tempo, man. Move that thing. Tennessee doesn't have a great offensive line, and they're able to have a bunch of offensive success. And I think we all know that one's a pass-first offense, right? That how much is that of that offense is on the quarterback? How much better did Tennessee? How much better have they gotten since Hendon Hooker has taken over and consistently made plays, both passing and running? Maybe you just don't want to have to say that at South Carolina. Say, Spencer Rattler's going to be our guy. What's our offensive identity? Number 7. He's going to make plays. He's going to do it passing first, with his legs second, and sometime in combination of those two. And then we're going to, once we loosen up defenses that way, we're going to be able to run the football on you. Because if you're going to scheme that up, then we're going to take advantage of the holes that you're leaving us. That's not that hard, is it? Is that, to me, that's not an admission that you can't run the football. It's just that your strength is throwing the football, or you have a better chance to win the game every single week doing that than doing the opposite. And I think to sell us that you can have a better chance running the football right now than throwing the football is garbage. I don't think anybody's buying that. I don't think you can buy that. Maybe you could sell that coming into the season. You did have a couple guys run for more than 100 yards against Florida last year. Yet Florida was a dumpster fire that night in Columbia. There has been some offensive success running the football under Marcus Satterfield, but it hasn't been consistent. And when you're asked, hey, man, how can you be more consistent, and say, I got no idea. Whew. That's a problem. I love the honesty, but that's a big problem. And I think it's a pretty simple answer then, right? I think you've given us the answer when you didn't want to, or for some reason you're reluctant to. You throw the football. You throw the football to open that up. Because you got a guy who was a preseason Heisman Trophy favorite, because you got some guys on the outside. You got more guys to help you win throwing the football than you do with the offensive line and the running backs. You got just better guys out there. But maybe you can't say that when you watch the Georgia State game and you get whipped on the perimeter. I don't know. Maybe the confidence just isn't there from the passing standpoint to go out there and say that. And I get that going into the game against Georgia, but when you're telling me about belief, let's get that one in there, because I loved what Shane Beamer had to say here. I thought it was spot on. To me, this is what a football coach has got to say in Shane Beamer's spot.
You have the benefit of college football showing you that anybody can beat anybody last weekend. Are you using that? How, I don't know, beneficial is it to be coming off of that week to kind of help encourage your guys and build that belief?
I'd say our guys have a lot of belief. You know, I told our staff on Sunday, I don't want to hear one person talking about anybody can beat anybody on Sunday. I don't want to hear one person talking about shocking the world. I don't want to hear one person talking about we just got to beat them. We just got to be better than them one Saturday. We don't have to be better than them all 12. And then as soon as I walk out of my text, as soon as I walk out of the staff meeting, I got text messages on my phone from family members essentially telling me the same thing. So I'm like, Jesus, you know. But there's great belief in our program. I don't have to rally them where to make them believe. They believe. They have confidence. They should. We're a really good SEC football team, and we got really good SEC football players. That a lot of players on this team that Georgia wanted on their team. And there's players on Georgia's team that we wanted on this team as well. So to answer your question, we have belief every single week. I don't have to sit in here and convince these guys that we can win the football game. We got a bunch of competitive dudes on this football team that can't wait to go compete on Saturday.
Spot on. Not true from the outside, but it's got to be what the team believes on the inside. If you don't believe you can win, you ain't going to win. If South Carolina didn't believe it was going to knock off number 1 Alabama in 2010, he wouldn't have done it. You can't go in and say, "Hey boys, let's hope it all works out. Let's play a perfect game, hope they stink it up, and then maybe we'll somehow pull out a miraculous victory." That's just not how it works, right? So that was a great example to me of the outside narrative versus the inside. But we know what Shane Beamer said hasn't been proven yet. That they're a really good SEC football team. No, they were okay last year. I think about average, wouldn't you say? A 6-6 regular season. No one's going to say that's a really good SEC football team. Now, maybe North Carolina said that after the bowl game last year. That was at the peak, right? Maybe Florida said that or Auburn said that after those games, but there were other examples the other way last year that balanced that out. So on the whole, I get you certainly believe that in the locker room as the head coach in year number 2 after a better than expected year number 1. And you're never going to have a big-time season. Arkansas would have never broken a 19-game SEC losing streak if it didn't believe that it was a better football team than it had shown. You got to believe that. As a fan, though, where is your belief there? I think that's the crux of this week for Gamecock fans. And I think it's very fair because how many times have you, just as a college football fan, dumped all the emotion and energy, enthusiasm, optimism into a season, a week, maybe a half or a play, and it doesn't work out, and brutal, right? So how many times can you do that? How many times do you do that? I think you got to pick and choose eventually when you do that, right? And you got to be realistic too, man. This is Georgia. This is a 24.5 point spread. They're the defending national champs. They've given up 3 points in 2 games. You struggled offensively against Georgia State. That Arkansas, you couldn't stop Arkansas running when you knew they were going to run. There are some problems there, for sure. Rogers says even George Rogers had to have a good offensive line when he won the Heisman Trophy. He said he wanted to cut it up and give each lineman a piece of it. Marshawn Lloyd's a good back, but he's getting any yards on his own. Chris says that's what I love about Beamer. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. But him saying all that, Kevin says, aren't you telling your offense y'all aren't good enough to run the football? So you're talking about, Kevin, this is, again, the internal versus external. I guess you got to believe it inside the locker room, right? South Carolina has to believe it's a good SEC football team before it becomes, I think, their reputation. Maybe you got to believe you can run the football before you can make that your reputation. But at a certain point, you are who you are. You can't lie to yourself as an experienced offensive line who hasn't really ever been able to establish that identity as being one of the better units in the SEC and a consistent one at that. Daddy-O says the truth will hurt feelings at times. I mean, the tape don't lie, right? Ball don't lie. So I think there's a big difference there with what we just heard from Shane Beamer about believing you can win and not taking on a underdog mentality, or it's going to take so many breaks and things to go right, which I think all of us on the outside have to rationally admit to or acknowledge. But on the inside, you got to block all that out. You have to believe that if you do what the coaches are telling you to do, that you can win a football game. You are going to compete. You're not going to give any thought to that team is definitely better than we are. No, you can't think that going in. But I think there's a difference between that belief kind of spiritually and believing you are better at doing something fundamentally than you actually are. Because that's when it's just, I think coaches do run the risk a lot of times of saying things those players don't believe. If Shane Beamer would have gone the next step and said, we here at South Carolina believe we have a better program than Georgia, well, that would have been ridiculous, right? You notice he didn't go there. And I think that's about the same level as coaches saying that, yeah, we just need to keep playing, and then our offensive line is going to eventually help us run the football more consistently. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. So it's kind of spiritual versus physical. And you can believe all you want to. Like, you can believe that you have a really good arm. This is what I'm dealing with kind of my 7-year-old right now. He believes he can throw the football a lot farther than he can actually throw it. But at some point, I got to tell him, hey, man, you're going to keep throwing interceptions if you do that. Now, you got to believe in yourself and believe you can win and believe in your program for sure. But you don't have to believe playing one style or one way and calling certain plays is the best way to win games. When people acknowledge the truth, it helps when working towards a goal. BS is easily seen. And maybe instead of seen, I think felt, right? And that player-coach relationship is so important because coaches say it all the time, right? That we're not here to hurt feelings, but we do have very honest discussions. I give them honest feedback. You'll hear a lot of coaches say, I'm honest with them. And they appreciate that ultimately. Maybe they don't want to hear it at the time, but it's a lot better than a coach who shies away from those very honest conversations and then players don't know where they stand. That's where you have big time issues in programs and you see all kind of drama, and that's never going to work. But also what's never going to work is not having an identity, not having, like, again, I always bring this up that G.A. Mangus told us, not being able to major in something on a college football offense. And South Carolina doesn't have that identity. And finding it against Georgia, maybe that would be the ultimate, the most realistic goal this week. To find something on offense to hang their hat on. Because if you can do it against Georgia, absolutely, you have to believe. I mean, that's where it is. It would just be truth, right? It'd be anti-BS. If you can do it against Georgia, you can do it against anybody. And that's not just selling somebody something. That's just college football 2022, right? If offensively you can do something against Georgia's defense, you better believe you can do it against anybody. Coaches don't have to sell you anything. So I think that should be the main goal. That would be an ideal scenario outside of a kind of earth-shattering, college football landscape-shaking upset win on Saturday. That would be a fantastic thing to take away from the first 3 games in general, right? You see struggle a little bit better, not going to upset number 1, but finding out who you can be moving forward. Well, that could be the difference between 6-6 and 8-4, 9-3. I still think that ceiling is there for this team. Nothing I've seen makes me knock that down a peg at this point. Do I think it's become maybe a little bit more difficult? Yeah, but in some ways. But a win against Texas A&M seems to be much more realistic after they lost to App State, doesn't it? Clemson hasn't shown us that they're absolute world beaters this year. I wouldn't think Beamer would hire a bad offensive line coach, Craig says, but they are in year 2 of Greg Adkins. Tons of starts, and they still can't get a push. Either they just stink or he can't coach. Well, this is where I think you got to defer to the experts that are in the rooms every day. And also you have to be a good evaluator of what you were given to work with. And I think recruiting has shown us that South Carolina coaches, they know where they need to improve the most, put most of their resources in, and it's been in the trenches on both sides of the ball, both sides. So you can kind of scapegoat whoever you want, and maybe that's the case. But I've just heard so many Gamecock fans through the years blame a position coach, and then I see a coaching change made, and I don't see real improvement. I think that's been the rule more than the exception. Sean Elliott coming in on the offensive line for the Gamecocks and taking over for Eric Wolford, but bringing the zone blocking scheme to Carolina, I think really did make a significant difference. Well, we've seen Sean Elliott kind of ascend through the coaching ranks, right? But by and large, I think that's a bit of an excuse. That rarely have I seen a position coach, maybe on the defensive line. You give Brad Lawing a bunch of credit for Carolina's success back in the heyday, right? But you had really, really good players too. And you got to give a coach credit for getting those players in. Craig says, maybe trying to run so many different things doesn't help our offensive line. Trim it down, find 5 run plays that they can block. Well, I heard Marcus Satterfield doing just that. He's saying, simplify, man. Let's hear that one again. It's a good time to hear that. Talking about being more consistent and simplifying here. The question, I believe, coming from Gamecock Central's Colin Taylor.
Schematically, from a coaching staff perspective, how do you go about being a little bit more consistent if those explosive plays aren't hitting at the rate they were against Arkansas?
I wish I knew that answer. I'm, again, not trying to be funny. If I did know that answer, we sure as hell wouldn't be inconsistent ever. I think we just had to keep coaching, keep peeling back, just keep doing things that our guys know how to do. Let them free their minds up and go play. And that's what we're trying to do right now, is just be as simple. I don't know, Aristotle, someone said simple is the true genius. Like, we're trying to be the most simple offense in America that can go execute and attack defenses. And I think we just keep working at that, and we keep getting a little bit better each week. And I think we're going to continue to improve as we move forward.
I think maybe it's the tone, how I hear that. Like, I don't know if Marcus Satterfield believes it when he says it. We're just going to keep working it and keep getting better. But that's the simplicity that you're talking about. Like, where I think what we're really talking about is any kind of communication issues, right? Any kind of confusion on what your assignment might be. And when I hear Corey Miller, maybe it's a defensive guy talking about it too, knowing that Corey was a defensive guy, always going up against the massive offensive lineman, says, it should be easy, man. Just zone block. Stay in that area. Anybody comes in there, block them. Right? No, and it's a little bit more complicated than that, obviously. And Carolina, unfortunately, makes it look a lot more complicated than that. Or
schematically from a coach.
Sorry about that. In the Marcus Satterfield era, for sure. Chris says we have an amazing receiving core. I think you got to spell that differently next time, Chris. We need to use that first. My thing with Marshawn Lloyd is that it seems he goes down on most first hits. Juju seems to fight more. Chris, I couldn't disagree more. Marshawn Lloyd is a load. And I think it also has the quickness to go with it. I think that's why he had the reputation that he did his very first preseason camp before the knee injury. I think that quickness or trusting that lateral movement was the main explanation for why he didn't have more success last year than he did, and why he is projected to be as good as some previous Carolina running backs. I think it looks like Juju McDowell fights more because he's smaller and he is really quick. He'll make guys miss, but he's not near the the power guy and is a liability. I think Marcus Satterfield kind of admitted as much in yesterday's press conference that they can't trust Juju McDowell to be in on downs where he's required to pick somebody up and help out blocking and protect the quarterback. I think that's just a massive liability that Juju brings on the field with him because of his size, and Marshawn Lloyd is more complete that way. And I guess what you're saying is Marshawn Lloyd seems to go down on most first hits and Juju McDowell doesn't. I guess that's fair because he is as quick as he is and elusive. But I think Marshawn Lloyd is plenty quick and plenty elusive to have success and be a really good running back. Craig says, I keep saying it, our playbook is the size of a Bible and we need Cliff's Notes. Well, you're hearing from Marcus Satterfield. He understands. And I think compared to maybe some previous offensive coordinators, that he might be doing a better job of that than others before. We heard Shane Beamer after game number 1 say we have a better idea now of what Spencer Rattler can take into a game and what he does well. To me, what I'm hearing is what we heard from Frank Martin a lot in a different way. Frank used to say that it takes me a while to figure out guys. We're still figuring each other out, players and coaches. And I think that was massively frustrating to hear from Gamecock fans, but I think it was absolutely true. And I think that's what I'm hearing in a different way from Marcus Satterfield. And I think I can only presume it has a lot to do with Spencer Rattler and Juice Wells, Corey Rucker, if he gets on the field, the new guys, because you don't have that explanation for the offensive line who's been there. Same guys that started last year. Marshawn Lloyd, been there. Juju McDowell, been there. That shouldn't be happening in year number 2 for sure. But with Spencer Rattler as your quarterback, absolutely. In game number 2, going into game number 3. Daddy-O says, whenever I get this disinterested about an upcoming game like Saturday, I almost always get surprised. Hopefully, history holds true. I think there's a lot of truth in that in college football. I guess if I had to narrow it down to one thing, why I would put college football above all else if I had to choose, I always hated that question. I still don't like that question. What's your favorite sport? Because I love all of them. All of them are amazing in their own way, but I think that's, if I had to choose one, I'd choose college football, and that's why. Because the consistency of the upset or the surprise, maybe the inconsistency, right, of being able to predict exactly how it's going to go down. It's not a parity thing necessarily like the NFL, where any given Sunday anybody can beat anybody. Well, we see that so often that it's those massive Sun Belt upsets where the spread is huge. And you do see a lot of those teams cover a lot of times, right? You do see Georgia give up 3 points in 2 games. You see Alabama consistently blow out teams, but then you see Texas. They should have beat Alabama. That doesn't make any sense. And that's why college football is at the top for me. If we can find ourselves, Roger says, on offense against the number 1 team in the country, in my mind, it's a win regardless because the rest of the schedule is still out there. I hope that's the case. Craig, it seems like every time Lloyd's in for a carry, there's a defensive lineman in the backfield. It's weird. No, that's not weird, Craig. That just means it's not really well blocked. Blocking is not a strength of the South Carolina offense right now. Craig agrees, though. I mean, Roger agrees with you, says he never has any room to run. Yeah, Craig, Stewart told us he was taking a role with the Gamecock Club. I think a couple of days before he actually did it here on the show. And Chris says that's a good argument for more teams in the college football playoff. Yeah, and that's why I get the semifinals, the expansion into the college football playoff. does have some drawbacks. I'm not trying to be pie in the sky Pollyanna guy and tell you that it's a perfect system and the whole deal, but that's where I struggle with guys who want to tell me that expanding a playoff is going to be the end of college football as we know it, or going to completely drag down a great game. I agree, Chris. The fact that we do see upsets, we do see things that we just can't explain on a really consistent basis in college football. To me, going into it with an open mind gives us the opportunity for a 12-game playoff to be fantastic. And I've certainly seen enough wildcard teams in the NFL go on to win Super Bowls to believe it can also happen in college football. I realize we've had a handful of dominant programs, and then you can pare it down even after that, right? Whoever wins the SEC, or an SEC team at least, is typically going to be playing for a national championship, sometimes two of those. And it can make it a bit of a foregone conclusion in a lot of ways in college football, but I want to see them prove it at the end of the year. And if I get to see them prove it 3 times instead of twice, I'm looking forward to that. And when I see a team like Cincinnati get into the college football playoff, gives, I think, more programs more hope to compete for a championship. That is a good thing for a sport. I'll never buy, will never, ever buy, if there are no playoff implications, or if there is not the major implication of you have to win a game at the regular season to keep your national championship hopes alive. If there's not that in a game like Alabama-Auburn, then there's going to be something missing. I think that's total garbage. I think college basketball shows us that. Even in 2022, where college basketball hasn't been anything close to what it was when I was growing up. That's an old guy line of the day right there. Shaking my fist at the clouds right now. Get off my lawn. Sitting on my rocking chair, drinking my lemonade. But every year, man, do you watch Duke and North Carolina play basketball? Alabama, Auburn ain't going anywhere. South Carolina, Clemson, as bad and uncompetitive as it's been, as one-sided as that rivalry has been recently, it's still a big deal. And it's not because Clemson has had national championship implications. That wasn't the case last year going into that game. And it's still, to me, you can't screw those games up. A college football playoff not going to do that. Sorry, got off on a tangent there, Chris, with your comment. So my question is, am I overhyping this thing as an identity crisis, or is this just an SEC team, an SEC program that was down in the dumps, at the bottom, has built a first-year foundation, a good one, and now is continuing to find itself? Or is this an offensive coordinator who will not be able to succeed? I think that's where the South Carolina program is right now with Marcus Satterfield, because we all saw year number 1, and I think most of us think if it had not worked out how it did work out in the bowl game, it would have been a tough sell for Shane Beamer to keep his offensive coordinator after the first year. Now through 2 games, I think we've seen more of that regular season last year than we saw bowl game success. And now you're facing the number 1 team in the country. It's why I said yesterday, I don't think the next 3 weeks of the Carolina schedule are going to tell us very much about the 2022 season. It's certainly the next 3 weeks after that the story, the narrative of Shane Beamer year number 2 really starts to head one direction or the other. If you're one of those that said 9-3, 10-2, it can happen this year, well, you're already going down. You're already reading a different book, right, with that Arkansas loss. But has it reached crisis level offensive identity? Is it an identity thing, or is it simply you got to make more plays, got to call better plays? Something that's a less dramatic than that and something that can be worked out. And this was part of the problem I had initially with the hire. Chris says, I think it's a coordinator still trying to find his identity. That's why I thought it was a difficult hire. Like, Clayton White came in with a clear identity, a clear defensive system. He's a 4-2-5 guy, and it has worked. And it is something that can certainly work at South Carolina. Marcus Satterfield didn't come in with that. Who is this guy? Assistant offensive line coach for the Carolina Panthers. Kind of the guy who knew the guy, been around Joe Brady. And, I mean, think about how that reputation kind of went up in flames real quick. It was such a bright star. And then a comet crashing to the ground. Joe Brady getting fired with the Panthers after one of the best seasons in college football history. I need to point that out for sure. Sorry, dramatic sip of water there. So I could completely be overanalyzing what I heard, how I heard Marcus Satterfield. I admit that for sure. Roger says it's been a while since South Carolina had a good offensive coordinator, hadn't it? Do you call Mike Bobo a good offensive coordinator? That's a tough one, right? I think it's difficult for me to do that right now, especially after getting fired at Auburn. After putting up some numbers at South Carolina, right? Kevin Harris did run for 1,000 yards in that 10-game season, but South Carolina's offense wasn't good. How much did he have to work with? I don't know. Did he maximize what he had? Maybe. But I don't think he's been a good offensive coordinator in a while. I mean, you certainly have to go back to Steve Spurrier. And then you can, I know Gamecock fans took their own shots at Spurrier, and that convinced me early on in the Spurrier tenure when you still had fans calling up and saying, why don't they throw the tight end more? Why did they make this play call? That wasn't the right one. And what were they thinking? It was clear evidence to me. And then the 2014 season where a lot of Gamecock fans criticized Dylan Thompson way too much, in my opinion, and blamed him for losses that were totally not his fault. Squarely a defensive deficiency and exposed multiple times in fourth quarters. Well, that's where it showed me that it's always going to be criticized no matter what you do. And you got to be near amazing to have complete support or anywhere close to it, probably at any SEC school, right? But it could have gone with a different hire that had a reputation, that had a body of work that brought with it an identity. And they didn't. And so that's why I think, 13 games total last year, 2 games in here, 15 games in to the Shane Beamer era. That's why I'm calling it an identity crisis. And also not just what I've seen on the field, but then how I've heard it talked about now, which I think it might be worse if we hadn't have heard from Marcus Satterfield. And then, but maybe this is an argument for Will Muschamp not allowing his coordinators to speak because Shane Beamer is as well liked as he is. And will take as much responsibility. He'll take it all, right? And know that he has it all ultimately. Like the offensive coordinator is his responsibility too. And Roger, you're just laughing at Mike Bobo being even considered as a good offensive coordinator? Okay. All right. So I don't know how you can work through this crisis other than finding something that consistently works against Georgia and then being able to repeat that in these other SEC games that are going to be much more competitive on paper going in. I think that's how I'm seeing this week. Chris says, I think that if this continues through the end of the year, Marcus Satterfield will be gone as offensive coordinator. I don't think that's going out on a limb at all. I think that's absolutely reality. And this being the offensive numbers or production, right? The run game being at the bottom of the league, the pass game being maybe towards the top. That's where it is right now, towards the top of the league, but ultimately not being a good college offense. Like you can sell it right now as Spencer Rattler's third in the SEC in passing yards, but total offense from a yardage perspective is 95th in the country overall. The Gamecocks are 125th out of 131 running the football. You can't have those numbers and continue to sell that your program is moving forward in the right direction on offense in through 2 years. You just can't. It's got to be better. And then the challenge is you got to do it now against Georgia. But maybe that's the opportunity if you want to look at it that way, right? House money. You do it against Georgia, you're kind of doing it at 2x, right? You get double credit in a lot of ways. So I'm sure that's the way that you would prefer to look at it, that you probably choose to look at it if you're Marcus Satterfield. I know I told you guys that Perry Orth was supposed to be on with us yesterday, last show, I should say. He had some conflict, so he's going to be on with us tomorrow. And it was fascinating. This is the world of social media, and I know in the 21st century we're always saying how bad social media is, but one of the great things about it was on Twitter the other day. I saw somebody analyzing what Steve Sarkisian in Texas just did against Oklahoma to really be creative, to throw wrinkles at the Tide. And Sarkisian kind of known for this offensively, and he lines up in one formation and a bunch of guys shift and they go like double pistol with a guy behind them and run all kind of motion in the pass out of the backfield. And then out of nowhere, I guess I had no clue this was going to happen, but former South Carolina backup quarterback, sends a reply to that, and it's South Carolina lining up in very much this a similar formation, kind of double pistol action there that Sean Elliott and G.A. Mangus put in after Steve Spurrier had moved on in the Tennessee game in Knoxville in 2015. And with Perry being the quarterback that day, I'm wildly interested to hear what he thinks could possibly be done this week for South Carolina to either confuse, to get creative. And again, part of the mixed messages I was hearing yesterday is Marcus Satterfield knows he needs to get creative and yet is simplifying things for his offense. He knows he's got to run the football better, but says 100% Spencer Rattler does affect the play calling and makes him want to pass the ball more. So what does Perry think is realistic? What was Lincoln Riley running in Oklahoma with Rattler? Let's run that scheme. Good thinking, Chris. The most successful college football offense in the last decade. Why not do that? Well, that's the thing, right? That's why Southern Cal paid Lincoln Riley all that money and why now they're putting up a bunch of points. It's not quite that easy. And Shane Beamer knows that scheme, knows exactly what it was and how, and has definitely pulled things from that. That was part of the sales pitch, right? That's what South Carolina's offense, they're going to take pieces from that Joe Brady and LSU offense. But it is a scheme that works. And Riley proved that in his days as an offensive coordinator at East Carolina that got him a look for the South Carolina head coaching job before he moved to Oklahoma. But I think that's right. Maybe he was offensive coordinator for a year at Oklahoma. I thought he was at East Carolina at that point because I remember seeing his name pop up in the job search. And now revisionist history. Well, obviously he would have been the choice instead of Will Muschamp or Rich Rodriguez or Tom Herman, Justin Fuente. But at the time, he was on the bottom of that list of candidates. But they do have the identity there. To me, that is the identity that this offense needs, right? You're going to spread it out. You put it on the quarterback. Let him run and throw it. That's how you're going to beat people. Maybe that's not even how he presents it, but that's how I perceive the Oklahoma offense. Now, they can run the football too. That's the difference right now. So I think it is a wildly interesting week for Gamecock fans in a lot of ways. And I hear what Daddy-O was saying earlier. He's like, yeah, I've noticed history tells me whenever I get this disinterested about an upcoming game, I almost always get surprised. Almost always, he said. I mean, 3 years ago at Georgia, a great example. I mean, the best example, isn't it, from the Carolina perspective? I don't think even the most optimistic Gamecock fan thought that could happen. And Carolina pulled the upset against Georgia. Maybe, unfortunately, Kirby Smart remembers that very well. And now Will Muschamp, who knew Kirby Smart really, really well, is also on that Georgia side of things. Gamecock fans might argue that's actually, on the whole, a much better thing. I would agree with that argument. So it's a kind of weird week with I think maybe a 24.5 spread. That's going to be what it is from the Gamecock perspective. And the Georgia rivalry going the way of the Clemson rivalry recently, nationally, from the zoomed out perspective, kind of minus that 2019 game. It's a tough spot. I think Shane Beamer passed that test and then some with the answer about the team believing. You don't have to sell that. And people stop text messaging me your only have to be better one Saturday and anybody can beat anybody kind of thing. No. This is a good program. Believe it's a good program. You got to have that from the inside. I guess if we would have heard something similar like that from Marcus Satterfield, I would not come away thinking identity crisis. The old, who are you? Was that Doobie Brothers? I don't know. That doesn't sound right to me. That's what I was thinking. That's what I think that's how my brain works. Maybe in music or like montage, the old TV editing nerd brain of mine. That's how it works. I just see like flashes of things when I hear things. I was hearing that music. Who are you? Sorry, I won't do that anymore. And then all the responses that kind of, what's your strength on offense? I'm going to name all my offensive positions. Well, that's not, you got to narrow it down. You got to pick a lane. You got to go. You got to major in something. The who. Thank you, Roger. That makes sense. Who are you? The who. I should have known that. Thanks for putting up with me today. Appreciate all you guys participating as usual in the live chat. And I know it's an exact opposite week in a lot of ways from the Gamecock perspective than it was last week. Last week, you're thinking, hey, got opportunities here. It's a good team going on the road, underdog, but you pull off the win, sky's the limit. Well, that ceiling has dropped. And now you're taking on the number one team, 24.5 point underdogs at home at noon. Yeah. Chris, another good full show, Tim. Have a good one, fellow Gamecocks out there. Oh, he didn't want the kiss in there. He said, sorry. Wrong emoji. LOL and fat fingers. Roger, enjoy the show as always. Have a good Thursday, everybody. I enjoyed talking about it with you for sure. And like I mentioned, really interested in hearing Perry Orth's perspective. Going to do that tomorrow. Predictions for sure. I think I have a good idea of what those predictions are going to be based on the tone of the comments this week, but we'll see if anybody gets brave, works up some courage and optimism tomorrow. It's still a home game on a Saturday in September. College football in its entirety, a full stadium. Let's remember where we are compared to where we have been in recent memory. Be thankful for that, for sure. Maybe I'll wear my "You only get so many Saturdays" shirt tomorrow. Take advantage of it. Still plenty to be pumped up about in a lot of ways. Appreciate you guys being a part of the show. Like, comment, subscribe, all that mess. Spread the word if you can. Much appreciated. Thanks for listening to this edition, September 15th, 2022. Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent.